Okay, so as we're moving along here, we're getting into more and more exceptions to the Fourth Amendment search warrant requirement. And here we're going to talk about consent searches. So there are several things about consent searches. One is that they must be voluntary. There can be no coercion, whether implicit or explicit. No implied threats, no covert force, no nothing. It has to be knowing, intelligent, and voluntary. And the voluntariness is the part that usually gets us in trouble. With that, we they it has to be entirely 100% voluntary. Okay. So voluntariness is evaluated in view of the totality of the circumstances. So, was there force or threats of force or other threats by the police? Was there a fraudulent or mistaken claim of authority, a misrepresentation or deception by police, arrest, and detention by or detention of the suspect, their knowledge of the right to refuse consent, informing suspects that they are free to go, clearness and explicitness of the suspect's consent, notification by police to the suspect's counsel, and advising the suspect about his or her Miranda rights. Um, so here we have lots of different things. Okay, I won't talk about each one of them in depth, um, but taking for instance um, the arrest or detention of the suspect. So case law says that you can ask for consent on a traffic stop. However, Kansas case law prohibits asking consent on a traffic stop. So it's going to be a state by state thing. But federally speaking, consent is permissible on a traffic stop because with a traffic stop, absent some other reason to compel, it's generally understood at the conclusion of a traffic stop, you will be free to leave. Okay, so similar to what we were just talking about arrests in the previous chapter, um, with this, um, with a traffic stop doesn't constitute an arrest. It is only a temporary detention because it's understood that you'll receive a ticket or a warning and be sent on your way, unless, of course, you're driving while suspended or have a warrant or DUI or something like that. Um, Suspect's knowledge of the right to refuse consent. That one there is actually the one that probably gets us hung up the most because most officers don't tell people that they have the right to refuse consent. And I will raise my hand and say that I'm guilty of this one myself. Usually, what I will do is tell you, um, I'll ask for consent, and then if people, uh, ask me, well, can you do that? Don't you need a warrant? And I'll be like, I'll tell them not if you tell me that I don't. Um, if they specifically ask or get close enough to the question of do they have the right to refuse consent, I will tell them. But it's not information that I proffer right out of the gate. Um, so, notification by police to the suspect's counsel. So that is generally whenever somebody is in custody, or if they request that we notify their attorney of the consent search. Miranda rights don't necessarily apply for a consent search, but it can't hurt. So, yeah, Miranda covers statements, not physical evidence. So, can't really hurt, but it doesn't necessarily apply here. So, individual factors and personal characteristics that weigh in on the voluntariness of the consent given. So, is this person intoxicated? Um, it can affect that. Now, here where it talks about intelligence and education level, there's not some golden standard that says that nobody without at least a high school diploma or GED can give consent. It's basically talking about, are you dealing with somebody that knows what they're doing? Do they understand what this consent means? So that's kind of what's going on there. So you could have somebody that's 12 or 13 that understands what this consent means, and you could have somebody that's 30 that doesn't have a clue. So it's going to depend on, do they understand what it means? Then, of course, you have language barriers, which falls right into that same category of, do they understand what it means? So then moving on, talking about police pressure and tactics and the length of the consent, or length of the contact, general conditions of the contact, excessive physical and psychological pressure, inducements or threats to compel a response. So here, the best examples that I have for you, like the ones that I gave in class, are whenever I pound on your door and ask for consent and tell you that I'm going to go get a warrant if you don't. Clearly, there is a bit of some psychological pressure or threats to compel. Now, the thing is I have told people before, hey, look, here's the deal: is I would appreciate it if you would give me your consent, but you don't have to. But if you don't, then what will happen is I will secure your house and go to the magistrate and make application for a search warrant. If the search warrant is granted, then we'll come back and we'll search it on our terms. And in the meantime, you're going to be displaced from your home. And so there, I am not trying to threaten or compel a response there, or putting any kind of psychological pressure on them. I am literally explaining a criminal procedure to them of what will happen, that they have the opportunity to give or not give consent. And if they give consent, I'll search and be on my way. If they refuse consent, no problem. I'll comply with the Fourth Amendment search warrant requirement, and I'll go and make application for a warrant. So there, I'm strictly just advising them of a criminal procedure and how things are going to follow on. Now, voluntary production of evidence does not constitute a search and is admissible. This would be something where if I ask you, do you have any drugs on your person? And suddenly you say, yeah, and pull them out of your pockets. That's not a consent search. It's a voluntary production of evidence, and the evidence is admissible. I didn't ask you to do that. You did it to yourself. So one of the things with consent is, does the consent permit the officers to search or merely enter the residence? Because permission to enter is different from permission to search. What is the allowable area of the search? What is the time to conduct the search? What is the permissible object of the search? And the ability to revoke consent. So if I ask for consent to search a car, you can tell me, yeah, you can search the car, just don't go into the glove box. You can search anywhere but the glove box. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my precious time searching everywhere while I wait for my canine to respond to sniff of that glove box to get me into it. But, I can search everywhere but that glove box. I can also, like permissible object of the search. Hey, John Q. Public, I'm looking for this fellow over here. I'm looking for Bob. Got wind that he's here. Would it be okay if we search your house for Bob? I don't care about your drugs. I just need to see if Bob is here. Can I do that? So you can say yes. And in that case, I'm only looking in places where I can find Bob. The other thing is you have to be able to revoke your consent at any time during the search. So that's one requirement there of a consent search, is that it has to be revocable. So I'm going to go ahead and take a moment of pause here, because this is going to get into a little bit with this who may give consents. it gets a little hairy. So I'll make one more short video, and that'll be it for